When I was teaching my students at the University of British Columbia about entrepreneurship, I would offer them two guiding principles. The first one is, don't try to be something great, try to build something great. And the second one is, don't build what you want, build what they want. The first guiding principle is about checking your ego at the door. Okay, when you're starting off on a big venture like building a company, you have to keep your ego in check and build a vision for everyone else to follow. The second motto has to do with servicing the customer. You should try to build something that they want to buy rather than something that you think would be really cool. All of this is covered in a book I've written called Build Something Great, which describes the do's and don'ts for startup entrepreneurs. Now, every startup begins with an idea, but it has to be a great idea. So how can you tell if your idea is great? Stay tuned to find out.
Warm welcome, everyone. We're living in a very interesting time, to say the least. There is a great deal of economic uncertainty globally and in Canada. And in these times, we can either retreat into victimhood or transform ourselves to build something great. And it's clear to me that Canadians are ready to meet the challenges head on to create the future that we know belongs to us. As Canada enters this new stage of our transformation, Canadians are meeting the challenges with every decision they make. I wondered about the contribution that I could make on my podcast to help people. It made me think immediately about my brother, who actually wrote a book about 50 tips to build something great, especially technology-related startups. Now, that's an area where Canadians will have to put our collective brain power together to become leaders in the global economy as we move into the digital revolution of AI. This book can also serve to help any entrepreneurs wanting to do a startup anywhere in the world, as long as they have a great idea. Well, I called up my brother and he agreed to do a presentation of his book for my podcast. But he went further than that. So don't go away, because he's going to tell you about a giveaway he has as his contribution to Canadians and others in our global family, especially during this turbulent economic time. Let me welcome him on, my brother, Dr. Resve Saleh.
Hi, Isme. Thanks so much for giving me the opportunity to participate on your podcast. I'm really happy to discuss, startups whenever I get the opportunity. And actually, this is a good, time in Canada to be considering a startup because of all of the economic uncertainties that we're facing in this country, trade wars and trade barriers and so on. So it's incumbent upon us as Canadians to pursue wealth creating mechanisms. And one of those mechanisms is, of course, the startup. And that's really what I want to talk about today. The topic is really a book I've written called Build Something Great. And I want to go through one aspect of that book with you today, but really in the intention of the book is to describe all the issues that someone who's interested in startups would have to deal with, and hopefully we can provide you with a lot of answers in that book. So thanks again for inviting me to participate on the podcast.
You're welcome. Well, thank you for coming, because I really think your book is going to be helpful to many, many people. And you have a giveaway that you're going to provide people. So we'll stay tuned for that. But before you start, I just want to ask you, what inspired you to do a startup in the first place?
That's funny you should ask, because I was thinking about that when you suggested that I participate in this podcast. I thought, when was it when I first got the startup bug? The idea that I could be an entrepreneur and things like that. And it actually goes back to when I graduated from Carleton University. I joined a fledgling little startup called Mitel Corporation. Many of you in Canada may have heard of that company. It's located in Canada, Ontario, and just outside of Ottawa. And when I got there, the atmosphere was so exciting, and there was so much energy in the building, and a lot of people wandering around with ideas, and lots of equipment scattered everywhere. It was like an unmade bed inside that little warehouse that we were located, but it looked like something exciting was happening here, and I was just lucky to be part of it. We had the two founders, Mike Copeland and Terry Matthews, come down and work with us shoulder to shoulder, and they would teach us classes on entrepreneurship. It was just a fantastic experience. And, that watching what happens in a fledgling startup, going from that warehouse to glass, mortar, and brick buildings that were shiny and new, and a number of buildings, that was very exciting. Now, when I left Mitel a couple of years later, I went to academia at UC Berkeley to pursue a master's and PhD. And the interesting thing I found there was that was a hotbed of startups right in our lab. I mean, that surprised me to no end. The fact that I was going there to get an academic degree, and everyone was talking startups, because we were just north of Silicon Valley, and everybody in the computer science department and the electrical engineering department were interested in startups. And in fact, we'd be working along, and one night 5 students would disappear along with a professor, and they'd reemerge in Silicon Valley with a new startup, and this kept happening. And in fact, I was also participating in that move to go to Silicon Valley and start a company. One of the graduate students in our group started a company, and 3 of us joined. And so I got to see what it was like to be in on the ground floor. I mean, starting at square one, and how a startup gets funded and evolves and so on. So that was very, very exciting. And then, I graduated, went to University of Illinois. I was teaching there for 10 years. And believe it or not, in the cornfields of central Illinois, everybody's talking startups. It's just, you can't escape it. I think it's part of the field that I'm in, which is the high-tech field. Everybody's, coming up with a new idea and trying to take advantage of it in terms of a startup. So there are people talking startups and so on. A lot of fantastic startups came out of the University of Illinois. So eventually I started my own company called Simplex, and that was in Silicon Valley. So I went back to California with my wife, and we started the company in 1995. So that's 30 years ago now, and got firsthand in the trenches experience with a startup. And I'm going to tell you a little bit more about that in the presentation. But once I finished up at Simplex, I went to Stanford to teach for a year. Everybody on this floor that I was on had a startup worth hundreds of millions of dollars, if you can believe that, right in Silicon Valley. So I left Stanford to join UBC and take a chaired position there and start a system-on-chip research lab. And everybody's talking startups there too. So I think it's just in the drinking water. I was going to be exposed to it one way or another. But really, the starting point was Mitel, but it continues, and I've been involved in 10 to 15 startups since. Okay. Now, being a professor at the university for many years, I'm going to do a presentation style podcast with you. And we'll get started with the first slide here. The title of this presentation is Build Something Great, and that's actually a shorter version of a personal motto that I have, which is don't try to be something great, try to build something great. And that's something I taught to my students at the University of British Columbia when I was talking about entrepreneurship. And the idea of that motto is that when you're starting a company, or actually involved in any endeavor where you have to bring a large number of people together, if you use an egotistical approach, such as this is my idea, or it's my way or the highway, or I invented all this stuff, it's not going to go over very well. It's going to push people away from joining your effort, and you need to get buy-in from everyone in a startup to make it work, to make it successful. Instead, you should have a vision that others will buy into and a mission that serves as a blueprint or recipe to follow by all the team members. And that's the way you build and launch a successful startup. So the full motto is don't try to be something great, try to build something great. In this particular presentation, we're going to be talking about how to build something great, and that something, of course, is a startup. The book that I wrote 10 years ago with my co-author David Oberhauser kind of has an interesting background to it. When we started our company in 1995, that was 30 years ago now, we quickly realized we didn't quite know what we were doing. And so I started looking around for a book that kind of would be useful as a guide, and I couldn't find any. I ended up reading 40 books in total over that first year in order to cram the knowledge that I thought I needed into my head so that we could get the startup off the ground. And so there wasn't really any book that we could draw from to really help us get going. So, what we did 10 years ago is that we decided to write the book that we wish we had when we started the company. And so we decided to put it in the form of tips. There are a total of 50 tips in this book. And these are the tips that we think are the most valuable. So I think we've done a really good job at, synthesizing all of the key ideas and key decisions that we had to make over that initial period to get the company off the ground. So that's really the genesis of the book. The first question is, how do you get started? And the starting point for most startups is an idea. You need an idea for a product. Now, this idea could either be an improvement to an existing product or a whole new product category. And there is a scenario where experienced startup founders get together and they sit in a room and start writing on the back of envelopes or scratch paper and come up with ideas and throw them against the wall and see what sticks. Okay. Now, I'm not going to advocate that approach to new entrepreneurs. A better approach is to look for a need in the marketplace or an idea that you've come up with on your own and develop that idea until you've got some sort of prototype that you can demonstrate to others as to, what the product does and how it works and so on. Okay? Now, in this presentation, what I'm going to do is show you or tell you how to evaluate an idea before you go off and you build the product and you build prototypes and launch a company. Okay? Now, there are 5 tests that I'm going to subject your idea to, and we'll go through each of those 5 tests. And if it passes all of those 5 tests, then you should go ahead and start the company. Okay? So that's what we're going to do here today. And I thought I'd start with the idea that launched our company in 1995 called Simplex Solutions. And Simplex Solutions was located in Silicon Valley. That's just south of San Francisco in California, for those who don't know. And at the time, there were 2 types of products that companies in Silicon Valley produced. They were either hardware or software, and we were a software company, just to give you a context. And the hardware folks were all designing chips. Okay, so what we were doing was we were trying to help them design chips with our software. Okay, now in particular, there was a problem that came up just at that time regarding the power grid of a computer chip. Now I show a figure of the power grid of a computer chip here, and many of you probably have not seen this type of figure before, but if you take off all the packaging around a chip, eventually you'll get something that looks like this under a microscope. And so what you're looking at here is a plan view of the computer chip, and in particular the power grid of the computer chip. Now, where do these chips reside in our daily lives? Literally everywhere. Mostly in our laptops and our cell phones, but also in our cameras, in our audio devices, in our multimedia centers, in our home, speakers, in our cars, everything. Okay, so it's part of our everyday life that we are using these computer chips in one form or another. Now in 1995, the issue came up of problems in the power grid. So I want to give you conceptually how to view the power grid of a chip. Imagine a city. So you've got an entire city, and you've got to design and route all the cable and wiring that supply the power to the entire city from some power plant. Okay. Now when it gets to a building, when the power gets to a building, you don't just run big cables all over the building. You have different sized cables for different applications within that building. And then different buildings are going to require different amounts of power. And homes are going to require less power than big buildings or medium-sized buildings or a manufacturing plant. So this all has to be pre-designed for the city. The same complexity occurs on a chip. So when it is building blocks of chips, something called transistors, they've got to design all the transistors and make them perform functions, but then they have to deliver the currents or the power that they need to do those functions. And the problem that arose is that the complexity of the power grid was so high that there would be failures in the power grid. Okay? In other words, there was not enough power being supplied to a portion of the chip, or too much power, or a wire was too narrow when it should have been wider. And so what we did was we designed a piece of software that would read in the entire chip and then tell you where the chip would fail. So for example, if this is a block on the chip and the power rail here is too narrow, then our program would identify that area as the failure point. Okay. Now this was an actual chip that a customer gave us, and they said, you know, here's a chip. We already know it failed. We're not going to tell you where it failed. You find the needle in the haystack. And in fact, it's a very difficult job. And so we ran our software, analyzed the chip, went back to the customer and said, right here, we marked it in red. And we said, if it's red, you're dead. And they said, you found the actual problem that cost us $300,000. And we said, coincidentally, that's the price of our software, $300,000, because it actually costs the company $300,000 to manufacture the chips, plus 3 months of delay to do the manufacturing. And so when they get the chips back, they all fail, or they all pass. And in this case, they all failed. So it's a complete waste of $300,000 in 3 months, which means their chip couldn't make it into the market in time. And so this is a kind of a catastrophic error. But we were seeing lots of chips from different companies fail in the same way, different places on the chip. And so we knew we had a winning product at that point. Okay, so I'm going to stop the presentation here for a few minutes. And Isme, just want to ask, do you have any questions or comments? I went through a lot of technical details. This is not a test, but did you grasp what I was trying to say, and did you get the analogy that I was trying to construct?
Let me see. I've been taking a lot of notes. So, you're talking about the power grid of a city, and you want to find out where the weakest links of the power grid are, if there's going to be a blackout or a brownout, except in this case, you're talking specifically about chips, and the analogy is the city-wide power grid. So I hope I took the right notes.
Yeah, that's pretty good. I think you got it. The other thing I want to mention is that, of course, the city power grid is a complex, very complex beast. And if something goes wrong, you go and find and fix it. So it's a continuous repair type activity for brownouts and blackouts. In the case of a chip, you have one shot, just one shot to get it right before you manufacture it. So everything has to be perfect or all the chips will fail. So that's just clarification there. Okay, so let's continue.
So now let's continue with the main body of the presentation, which is how do you evaluate new ideas? And to be honest with you, when we started our company, we had no idea about these tests that you should apply to your product or your idea. And so we were just, thinking, oh, if we build it, they will come. Everybody's going to buy this stuff. But had we applied these 5 tests, we would have known that we had a winning product. Okay, so I'm going to go through these 5 tests with you. And the key thing to note is that you have to pass every one of these 5 tests. You have to validate the new idea with these 5 tests. And if you pass all 5 tests, go ahead and start your company. Okay. Now, there are more than 5 tests, but these are the ones that give you the confidence that you really have something and you should go ahead and run with it. Okay. What's the first test? The first test is product differentiation. How is your product better? Okay. Is it smaller, cheaper, faster? Does it provide more productivity? Does it produce better outcomes? Is it easier to use? Is it addictive? And on and on and on. For example, in this case, we have an existing product in blue here, but you designed this product, which is smaller, and so this would be a differentiation. Or over here, a product that's of the same size, but it's cheaper. Or here, this product with the racing stripes here is faster. So smaller, cheaper, faster, right? And all the other differentiations that we show here. Now, if we go back to the product that we developed at our company, what's the differentiation that we had? Our differentiation was we defined a brand new product category. Some capability that was not available currently, we were making available. We were finding the needle in the haystack in terms of the power grid, and we were showing up with a metal detector, if we further that analogy. So the next test is probably a more interesting test, and that is focus on the must-haves. And this is something we didn't know at all. We had no ideas. They're giving us all this jargon when the investors were looking to invest in our company, and they said, "Is your idea a painkiller or a vitamin pill?" We said, "We don't know. It's sort of a solution to a problem." And they said, "No. Is it a must-have product or a nice-to-have product?" And of course, we said it's a must-have product, and they said, "Well, then it's a painkiller." So we started to pick up on this jargon of painkillers versus vitamin pills. And the idea is that a painkiller product is something that solves a critical problem for the customer, and they must have it. It's just like if you have a headache, you reach for a painkiller, like a Tylenol or Advil or maybe aspirin. On the other hand, if you don't have any pain, then you can have your vitamins, okay? But you're certainly not reaching for your vitamins when you have pain. That might not be the right mix. So, vitamins can help you in the long term, but painkillers solve an immediate problem. So the bottom line is build this, not that. Okay, that was what they were telling us. And so in our case, we had built this power grid solution which identifies where the chip would fail. So we were building a painkiller product. We didn't know it at the time. We didn't know the jargon, but we were solving probably the most critical problem in chip design at that time. And so we were inadvertently creating a painkiller product, which then puts you in a very good position for making money as a startup. The third one, again, these are all terms we didn't know anything about. Unfair advantage. What is your unfair advantage, they would ask us. And we would say, well, we started last week and we don't know what we're doing. So that's an unfair disadvantage. But the question really is, why will you succeed where others would fail? And so it has to do with what's your secret sauce, okay, ultimately. And it could be some sort of expertise that your inner group has that no one else has, or very few people have, or a technology that you've developed, or some know-how that other people don't have, or you understand the marketing and sales channels better than anybody else, or you have an exclusive agreement with a supplier and that gives you a leg up on the competition. So here's an entrepreneur, seasoned entrepreneur with their secret sauce making something. What was our secret sauce, or actually what was our unfair advantage? Our unfair advantage is we could handle larger and larger chips. The chips were actually becoming bigger and bigger. So when we started, maybe 10 million transistors on a chip, and we could handle 10 million, and the competition could handle 1 million. So they can't handle the entire chip. They could only handle 1/10 of it. When the chips started to grow in size to 50 million, we could handle them, but the competition could handle 5 million. When they grew to 100 million, we could handle 100 million transistors. The competition could handle 10 million. So we were always one order of magnitude better than the competition, and that was our unfair advantage.
Okay, so I'm going to stop the presentation at this point. And Isme, I'm going to ask if you have any questions or comments on what you've seen so far. And if not, I'll just keep going.
No, I don't have any questions so far. You've said a whole bunch of things that I actually didn't know about, so that's great. So I would just keep going, Riz.
Great, then we'll just go ahead with the next test. The fourth test is the customer base. So when you're building a new product and it's working and you've kind of got plans to build a company, list your top 10 customers, if they happen to be businesses. If they are people, then you say, what demographic would you be going after? Okay? But you really want to build a product, and here you are with the product, and you want Peter, Paul, and Mary to show up with the cash and bags of money to buy your product. And who are these customers? And how much will they pay? So that's really what you're trying to do. Who are your customers? How much would they pay? And you want to be able to build a sales forecast using that information. That's really the purpose. But if you can't name your customers or the demographic that you think will buy the product, you just say, wow, they'll be customers at some point. You're going to be wrong. So, and you won't have a way of putting together your sales forecast for the first 5 years, which is something you have to do to get money from investors. Okay. Now, who are our customers and how much would they pay? Well, I think I told you, all of these chip manufacturers, chip design companies would be our customers. So we could list them all. We had a long list. How much would they pay? $300,000, because that's what a mistake costs them. And when they buy our product, they get multiple licenses. So it's not they pay $300,000 for each chip. They pay $300,000 and then they can use it for a number of chips over a certain number of years, depending on the contract that they sign. So that's a critical part of getting the sales forecast for your startup. And then finally, test 5 has to do with barriers to entry. It's really about the competition. So can you defend your castle? Here's your castle right here. It's has a moat around it with alligators in it. So an alligator-infested moat around your castle. Can you defend that castle from the invading enemy? Because from day one, as soon as the competition understands that you have a winning product, they're going to try to replicate it or put you out of business. Those are their two options, and they'll go after that hard. So we were taking incoming right from the get-go. And so the way you defend yourself is really through patents or through NDAs, which are non-disclosure agreements, or you don't want your information about the way you're building your products to leak out to the competition, so limit access to sensitive information for your employees. We made the mistake of telling everybody in the company how everything worked, and when some of them were fired or some of them were let go or some of them left, they went to the competition and they told them everything. And so, our naivete cost us, but fortunately we had that advantage of our technology. And so you can do IP protection. Our real advantage was time, because we were about 1.5 to 2 years ahead of the competition, and we were able to stay ahead. And that was really our barrier to entry, because once they figured out how we were doing things, they started to replicate it. They were always one generation behind us, but they were catching up. And so we had to start, diversifying our product lines and buying up other small startups to kind of build up our total package of products.
Okay, I'll stop here again to ask Isme, if you have any questions or clarifications.
I think here you're talking about the competition, because we know that even if you have a good idea, the competition will always try to beat you by doing their own version of things, and that is actually a threat to your company. So I guess that's what you meant.
Yes, that's it exactly. You have to watch out for the competition and have built-in barriers to entry for the competition, so that you always have some sort of competitive advantage. Okay, and with that, let's get back to the presentation.
Now, if your product passes all these tests and a few more that might have to do with timing or regulatory issues might exist and things like that, but generally those 5, then strongly consider starting a company. And the way you want to do that is to build what we call a minimum viable product, or MVP. That is stripped down version of your product with the basic capability that solves the customer problem or makes it useful for the end customer. Okay? Then develop an elevator pitch. This is about a 1-minute spiel, or 1 or 2 minutes, that you can use on potential investors, people you're trying to hire, potential customers, that get them interested in what you're doing. In our case, it might be something as simple as, hey, chips are failing due to problems in the power grid, and so it costing people $300,000 every time they make a mistake, and 3 months of lost revenue. And so what we do is we identify where on the chip failures could occur. Then the designer fixes those before manufacture. So that's how we are, putting our product together and making money. Would you like to join our company, or would you like to invest, or would you like to buy our product? And then pitch the idea to investors. And this pitch is sort of like what you see on Dragon's Den, for example. Similar kind of thing, a lot more scrutiny, a lot more time, a lot more due diligence involved. Nevertheless, basically that's what's going on. And just to give you a postscript to our company, we did go public, and that was in 2001. And then we were bought by a bigger company called Cadence in 2002. And so it was a very successful startup by any measure, and we were sort of the talk of the town for a number of years. But the thing that I'm most proud of, out of all the things that I've talked about, is that our company built a methodology called power grid verification, and the manufacturers of chips said, you're required to go through that methodology to verify your power grid before we will manufacture your chip. In other words, we had an impact, a long-lasting impact, even after the company went public and got acquired. So that lasting legacy still lives on. In other words, every chip designed today has to go through power grid verification of the type that we developed at Simplex. So I'm really proud of that accomplishment. So here's the giveaway now that you've listened to the entire talk, and I appreciate that. So I want to give you a free copy, a free PDF of the book. And this is all you have to do. Hit the like button for this podcast, subscribe to this channel, and then send a request to the email and use the subject line Free Startup Book. And once you've done this, we'll send you a free copy of the book, and hopefully you find a lot of value in the book. I haven't been able to go through all the different issues that you're going to encounter if you should start a company, but definitely covers all of those points as well as what I've talked about today. And with that, I'll turn it back over to Isme.
Wow, Riz. I really want to thank you very much for that generous offer. If you try and buy the book on Amazon, it is still $35.99. I would hope that everybody, certainly in Canada, because we want to be competitive, but anywhere around the world would have access to the knowledge presented in this book. I'm hoping that it will help. Share this with your loved ones, friends, family. Much love to everybody. Thanks everyone for watching, and don't forget to smash that like button and subscribe.